Harry Enten, a senior data reporter at CNN, is joining us live from Hudson Yards in front of the Magic Wall. Harry, thanks for being with us.
It is such a pleasure to be here. It is a dream come true to be talking about March Madness in March in front of actual people instead of just to myself in front of the mirror.
So you're clearly excited. How excited are you for the tournament? We're certainly happy you're here with us.
I am so thrilled because every year we get to March, and it's sort of this sports desert for me, at least, after the Super Bowl until baseball. And then March Madness comes in, and it's the shining light, and it marks spring, which, of course, actually starts tomorrow. So the sun is out, the birds are chirping, and we're going to have a magical field of 68, soon to be 64. And I'm so looking forward to it.
Well, tell us your favorite March Madness memory.
There are two. One was back in '96 when UCLA, the defending champions, went down to Princeton University. It was a 13 versus a 4 seed. Princeton had been trying to win as an underdog for years under Pete Carril. They finally did it. I think they won 43-41. And the other favorite March Madness memory that I have is the 1999 championship game. I was really rooting for UConn. My best bud at the time, Jeff Zahn, was really rooting for Duke. Duke was the favorite in that game, but UConn was able to defeat Duke in the final seconds of that game, and I got to hold it over Jeff the next day in school. So I think that one's probably number one for me.
And still clearly holding it over Jeff, it seems.
Yeah. I would say that I hold a grudge for a long period of time. I definitely will always hold this over Jeff. We're not friends anymore. Time has sort of elapsed, and you lose track of friends. But the fact of the matter is, UConn forever, Duke forever in the dungeon, as far as I'm concerned.
That is just the funniest thing I've ever heard. That works out well for you with UConn as the #1 overall seed this season.
It works out very well for me that UConn is this year the #1 overall. And this has just been a glorious sort of 2 decades for UConn, right? When I first started rooting for them in 1999, they had never won a title before. Only on the women's side they had won. But since then, I've sort of gotten lucky in basketball. I've gotten lucky in baseball. I hate the New York Yankees, and the Yankees are currently going through a very long stretch of not winning the World Series. So I'm doing well in 2 sports. If only I could bring the Buffalo Bills in and they could start winning some Super Bowls, then I'd truly be on a marvelous run.
Hey, Harry, we were getting along well until you said you hate the Yankees, but we'll keep going. I know you have some numbers prepared, so take it away on the Magic Wall.
All right, let's take it away. We had a nice little discussion there, but let's sort of get into the math of March Madness and how the nation is picking. And I think there are just some really interesting trend lines going here. So the most popular #1 to win it all, my UConn Huskies at 25%. The nation's doing very well here. How about most popular non-#1 to win it all? It's interestingly enough not a 2 seed. It's a 3 seed in Kentucky. A little less than 7% of the country at this point is picking Kentucky to win it all. How about the biggest first round upset? Take a look here. It's NC State. At 46% of the country is picking NC State to win in its first round. Of course, they're an 11 seed. What's so interesting here, of course, is they marched through that ACC tournament. No one expected them to do well, but America at this point is expecting NC State to continue its momentum at least 1 game into the tournament. Now, the question you may be asking yourself is, how well does the nation generally pick? So let's go back through history a little bit, all right? This is bracketology since 2014. The most popular #1 of all time was in 2015. It was Kentucky. But guess what? They didn't win. They actually lost in the Final Four. So not exactly a good thing for how the country is picking. How about the least popular #1? That was back in 2016. It was 2017. It was the Tar Heels, UNC. And they actually won the title game. So interestingly enough, in this particular case versus this particular case, maybe the country doesn't know what's going on. And that's sort of the beauty of March Madness. You never do know what's going to go on. Now, of course, here, I love this. The biggest surprise champion was in 2014. It was the UConn Huskies. Look at that. They were a 7 seed back then. Get this, just 0.23% of the country picked UConn. I'm not even sure I picked UConn to win that particular year, but they were able to do it. Fantastic result. So country sort of does okay, sometimes not, but generally speaking, it's March Madness, baby. Now, let's go back to this year. Let's talk about Cinderellas, all right? Because I think we all love a good Cinderella. Who is the country picking as a Cinderella in 2024? 1% of the country is picking McNeese to win it all. Keep in mind, No number 12 has ever won a title. In fact, no number 12 has ever come anywhere close. The furthest they've ever advanced is to the Elite Eight. So this would be truly unusual. This is what you much more would expect if you were looking at, say, a 3 or 4 or 5 seed, maybe 1% to win there. So this is very, very unusual. This is something where I might say that McNeese is, I dare say, overvalued a little bit. So let's take a look at some under versus overvalued teams, all right? If you're picking your bracket right now and you're saying, okay, how could I do well versus my friends? What are some undervalued teams? How about number 4 here in Kansas? They're the least picked top 4 team to win. So they're a pretty good. Jayhawks are not a bad team. Interestingly enough, when I was in Pee Wees playing basketball, we were the quote-unquote Kansas Jayhawks. They always give you those teams to sort of play. How about Marquette, all right? They're a number 2. They're the least picked number 2 to win the tournament. So either Kansas or Marquette, those are some pretty good teams you might pick if you're trying to find those undervalued picks. Now, we mentioned overvalued, all right? McNeese, 1% to win the tournament. That's probably a little bit too much. I know Pat McAfee is really into them. A lot of the other folks are into them. They've had a really good run since November. But the fact is 1% pickings, a little bit too high. How about 15, St. Peter's? Now, I love St. Peter's, right? They went on that magical run a little bit ago. 8% are picking them to win in the first round is a 15 seed. That is not where you want to be. St. Peter's, a little bit overvalued. Maybe there are so many people picking from the New York City metropolitan area that they're sort of spoiling the sample size. But either way, St. Peter's, a little bit overvalued there. Now, let's take a look here. First round upsets, a chance of first round upset. This may be a reason to sort of fill out your bracket and try and get an understanding. Okay, couldn't this miracle thing that we're actually looking for in those first rounds, because really it's the first rounds where those miracles happen. Again, I mentioned Princeton earlier on defeating UCLA. We've seen those 16 versus 1s. But what is the real chance of a real upset in the first round? Well, an 11 over 6, pretty good shot there, right? 38%. How about a 12 over a 5? 35%. 13 over a 4. Remember, I mentioned Princeton over UCLA. It happens. It happens about 1 in every 5 times at 21%. 14 over a 3. Now we're really starting to see the floor sort of drop in, right? Just 14%. 15 over a 2, 7%. 7%. So, hey, you know what? St. Peter's, maybe that 7% kind of matches. Maybe it's not so overvalued after all if you're looking through history, although if you're looking at the KenPom ratings, perhaps this year it's a little bit of an overvalue. And then finally, a 16 over a 1. I remember this had never happened up until a few years ago, right, when Virginia lost. But now, after University of Maryland, Baltimore did it, and then Fairleigh Dickinson did it, 1%. So we've risen from 0 to 1%. If anything, March is becoming even more of a madness situation going on. We're getting even more upsets happening. All right, so this is a chance of a first round upset. But, if I'm just going to sort of give you some tips as you're filling out your bracket, some suggestions. All right, here we go. Pick a few upsets in the first round. We're going to get to my bracket perhaps a little bit later on. I have a few upsets in the first round, so that's a pretty good idea. But keep in mind, don't be too mad. Do not go bonkers with your bracket, all right? Do not pick a 16 seed to go all the way. That probably won't work out for you. And keep in mind that later rounds count more, and the 1, the 2, or the 3 seeds have won 85% of the time over the last, say, 40 or so years. So the fact is, you probably want to pick a high team to win at the end of it all, even if you're picking some low-rated teams to advance to that second round. But I have the most number 1 piece of advice is have fun. That's what we should be doing here. I covered a lot of serious topics in my day and time, but this is a serious topic, but it's one in which we can have fun. There are going to be upsets. Chances are you're not going to have a perfect bracket. So when you see that your bracket's sort of falling apart, it's okay. Don't worry. Pretty much everyone else's bracket is falling apart too. The bottom line is it's March Madness for a reason. You should have fun. So those are my piece of advice, Michaela.
All right. Well, Harry, good tips. Do you want to take a look at your actual bracket?
Do I want? Well, I don't know. Do I want to be embarrassed or not? Look, not much of a surprise. I have UConn winning it all here, right? I have them beating Houston, which I know a lot. I know this was of the least surprising things. This is almost like a happy ending to, a child book, right? I think we all
I couldn't
knew.
have guessed it.
You could, no way you could have,
Yeah.
no way. Maybe if the Columbia Lions were in there, if they ever possibly win an Ivy League title on the men's side, then maybe that would be interesting if I picked between Columbia and UConn. But the fact is, UConn I have as number one. If you're looking for some interesting sort of upsets that I sort of have, well, a second round upset that I have, I know you can't really see it here, is, I hate Duke. So I have Duke advancing to the second round, but then I have Wisconsin beating Duke. I'm hoping they do to Duke what they did to Purdue, right? So I'm hoping for Wisconsin there. Other sort of upsets that I have going along the way is I have Gonzaga actually advancing all the way in the late rounds, then getting defeated by Creighton, who, of course, being a 3 seed, you wouldn't expect to advance to the Final Four, but I ultimately have Creighton losing to Houston. And another upset that I really enjoy is Michigan State. Michigan State always seems to bring it in the tournament, right? I have Michigan State advancing not just to the 32, not just there, but also to the round of 16, and then to the Elite Eight, where they finally lose to Arizona. So I have some upsets in there, nothing too big, but some upsets in there that, at least for my bracket, make it a little bit interesting.
Wayne, what do you think? You like his bracket?
I do, yeah. I think, Harry, you have a good mix of obviously pick with your heart. It's hard not to do that, especially when the team that's in your heart is the huge favorite going in, and it worked. I'm sure well for you last year. The Tom Izzo Michigan State one, I feel like that one, it always seems to work out. We saw last year they went on a surprising run from their seed line, so I gotta love that. And yeah, that Duke Wisconsin game could be really interesting because honestly, they both could get upset. They both can meet. I mean, that could be a weird combo of teams there that could kind of find a way out of there. So yeah, I love it. I mean, I feel like it's fun. Like you said, you have to make these upset picks, but you can't do it too much. There's a limit to the madness, I think, even for all of us, me included. I know I'm kind of like going back and forth on my picks.
I would just point out, Wayne, that's exactly right. Especially with that Duke Wisconsin game. Wisconsin doing so well in their conference tourney, and Duke sort of falling apart. Duke is just one of these teams where sometimes it just seems like they either could go all the way and then they lose this sort of surprising game sort of going down the stretch. And this is, I'm just hoping. I'm hoping even without Krzyzewski there, I am hoping that the new Duke is kind of like the Duke of old the last few seasons and sort of just falls apart in the tournament. But the fact is, I was talking with my buddy Neil Payne, who actually does sports for a living, and he dared to put in our group chat last night that he feels like Duke could do considerably well. And I said, how dare you? And he said, look, bro, I'm just looking at the numbers. So, I have Duke, I'm biased against Duke, which is okay. I can be biased on the sports side, but it wouldn't surprise me if Duke advanced further. But you know what? This is my bracket and I'm sticking to it.
I was going to say, Harry, we were hoping you would come over to the sports side, but then you'd have to lose that Duke bias.
Oh, come on. Maybe I could be a sports commentator. That's what I would be. I always love, instead of being an analyst, I'd be a sports commentator, and then I could bring my bias in, or at least I could acknowledge my bias. But at the end of the day, the numbers are the numbers. Even if I didn't have Duke going out in the round of 32, I would not be having them go to the Final Four pretty much no matter what numbers I cooked up, unless it was cooked up perhaps in a Duke laboratory.
Yeah, we'll make your sports analyst lower third. Harry Enten hates Duke. No matter what.
You know what? I have never been bequeathed with a greater title than that one.
All right. Well, we're about to move on to the concept of the odds of a perfect bracket. I know you think this one's probably perfect, but Harry, do you know what the odds are of a perfect bracket?
This is always the question that gets asked, and I believe it's 1 in 9.2 quintillion if you are picking it randomly. Of course, we have some aids with some statistics, so we're not picking it perfectly randomly. So the odds you do get better odds if you're actually picking a little bit with your brain. But the fact is, there's a reason why Warren Buffett has been offering $1 million for a perfect bracket. The odds are astronomical. The fact of the matter is, you're better off going out and playing the Mega Millions or the Powerball than trying to pick a perfect bracket if you're trying to win millions of dollars.